Let me go ahead and introduce Richa now. She is an engineering manager on the growth team here at Coursera. Her team is responsible for driving top of funnel growth to monthly active learners and degree learners on the platform. Richa has been a multi-stack engineer working on the back end, mobile, and front end at companies like Microsoft, Amazon, and Mapper Technologies, in addition to Coursera. She transitioned into her leadership role in early 2018. A lifelong learner and passionate about technology, she's always looking for opportunities to bring more diversity into the tech community through group and individual mentorship in the area of technology and career development. So without further ado, take it away, Richa.
Great, thanks a lot, Laura. So like Laura mentioned, by way of introduction, my name is Richa Khandelwal, and I'm an engineering manager at Coursera. I've been at Coursera for 4 years, a little over 4 years now. And for 3 years, I've been on the growth team, doing a lot of engineering across multiple stacks. Laura mentioned I'm a multi-stack engineer. What that means is I've worked in multiple areas, starting from my experience in big data and distributed systems, and then transitioning to be an Android engineer, trying a little bit of front-end engineering, doing back-end engineering. And most recently, since last year, I've been managing a team of growth engineers comprising of front-end and back-end engineers. Before I go into my background and my career path so far, I do want to set out some agenda for the rest of this webinar. So for the rest of the webinar, I'll be talking about growth quite a bit. I might be glossing over some of the things about growth in the context of product and marketing, but I will provide a lot of links for you guys to go back and read about it a lot more. I will try to provide as much context as possible. I will dive into the skills that a growth engineer needs to have, skills that they should have, and skills that they can learn. And then also talk about what does a day in the life of a growth engineer look like, and potential resources and training that can be accessed to go on this career path. Great. So a little bit about my background. I have a bachelor's in computer science and engineering, and then a master's degree in computer science. Computer science was always my passion. When I graduated, for some time, I delved into distributed systems and big data. Then while I was at Amazon, I got intrigued by the entire mobile boom that was going on in 2012. I had very limited experience with UI UX engineering. I was doing some Android platform work back at Amazon. And then I did a boot camp to immerse myself into the experience of not just Android app development, but also understanding a lot more about what UI UX development really means. It was about an 8-week intensive boot camp program, but it left me with a lot of skills in that area. And I really understood how to go from wireframing to actually building an app from end to end. From API backend perspective all the way to UI and UX. So that was my first full stack experience. And then I moved to Coursera. At Coursera, I started as an Android engineer. About 1 year down the line, I got intrigued by growth. To be very honest, it was not something specifically about growth that intrigued me. It was more about, oh, this is the hot new area and Coursera has a growth team, and this is a really great opportunity to try out a new product area entirely. So that's the reason why I joined the growth team. And I also got a chance to further my skills in the area of UI UX development overall. Then I started learning front-end engineering, React.js. What helped me quite a bit during that transition again was taking 3 courses from the full stack web development specialization that we have on Coursera. So that gave me the skills, required me to bootstrap again into a new area. I love JavaScript. I love programming in JavaScript, and I loved ES6 and all of the cool constructs that come with it. Then slowly, after 1 year, I transitioned more into a full stack role where I started doing backend again. I had experience using Java. At Coursera, I got a chance to also experiment with Scala. And what again helped me learning the new language was take the functional programming with Scala course on Coursera. And then last year, I transitioned into an engineering manager role. And needless to say, again, Coursera was there for me, where I was able to take the course Managing Company of the Future, which is a great course for anyone who's wanting to explore that area, even if you're not a manager. And I also, of course, took other trainings, other resources that Coursera had for me, but Coursera courses have helped me along the way during my different career transitions. Yeah, so that was a little bit about myself and how I landed where I am. Topics that I'm usually excited about are building teams, creating a culture of collaboration and learning, building secure software, personalization and machine learning is another area of interest. Because I work on growth team, I get to interact with those sides of things quite a bit. Architecting and engineering great software products in general, regardless of its stack, which domain they are in. And growth engineering in particular is also an area of interest for me. So if you have questions about any of these areas, in addition to growth, feel free to ask me about those. Two fun facts. I was part of the first cohort of Coursera that went through Android's machine learning course back in 2012. So if any of you were also took that course, we were probably in the same class together. And then the second fun fact is the community platform where the webinar is going to be hosted and was announced was built by my team. So cool. So let me get started talking about what is growth. It is a hot new term, but is also not very well understood and is not very well standardized across the board. I have some slides. Let me dive into those. Cool. Can everyone see my slides? Laura, can you see my slides? If you can just let me know.
Yes, I can see them.
Okay, great, awesome. For a moment, I was confused whether they are visible or not. Cool. So what is growth? Before I dive into that topic, let me set some context about it. Let's say you got a bunch of funding and you want to start an offline retail store somewhere. What are the first set of things you would do other than buying the merchandise that you would display in your store? You would figure out what would your storefront look like. You would figure out who are you opening that store for. Is that for a specific type of audience, or is it for anybody under the roof, or anybody anywhere? So that's the first thing you'll figure out. You'll set up the storefront. You'll figure out how to display the products so that users can find the right kind of products that they're looking for. For example, if it's just a store for women, you would probably just think about sizes, maybe think about petite and plus sizes, think about all of these different things. Make it easy for your customers to find what they're looking for. You'd also set up a nice cash counter with a bunch of different payment options, including cash, credit cards, and in today's age and world, Android Pay, Apple Pay, all of those kinds of options as well for the users. You would also try to figure out how to delight your users. Is it the price point? Are you selling things that are a lot cheaper in your store than at other places? Or is it the premium quality of your merchandise? What is it? And how do you let the users know about what is it that they're coming for to your store for? So those are the kind of things that you will try to think about. And the thing to notice, it has all of these things have nothing to do with your merchandise. This has everything to do about how you're selling your product. You can also apply it to the car manufacturing industry. For example, dealership is basically directly comparable to what growth is, and car manufacturing is what the rest of the product development is. So that is another analogy to what growth does in any industry or in any e-commerce platform or consumer platform. It is building products to grow the user base, or it could be revenue, or it could be some other metric depending on the type of business that you're running. It is about, in the words of some of the very famous growth hackers, it is about how to get people on the front door, how to get them to the aha moment as quickly as possible, and how do you deliver core product value as often as possible. So it is all about how do you help users discover your brand value, your presence, your value prop, and make them loyal customers. Growth teams also serve as incubator for new product or business streams. So if you're thinking about a brand new business idea and you want to figure out whether or not this is going to work, you can do it under the umbrella of growth to try and see how much of your user base will grow in that business stream, to see whether or not that's a viable business plan for you. So that's growth in a gist. I hope it was clear. If not, feel free to ask me further questions about that. Cool. So let me talk about a few other concepts surrounding growth. So for example, this is Coursera's login page. This was built by the growth team to set up the storefront. Here is Pinterest. Here is Amazon. These are usually growth strategies to help users find value prop from your product. And there is a reason why the front page of each of these products is set up in different ways. Here's an example of a product page, a course page on Coursera. And here is an Instagram post. And here is a product page on Amazon. So again, as you can notice, that each of them, the product page and the storefront are very different from each other, and it all depends on the type of product. An exercise after the webinar, and I'll be sharing the link to the webinar notes at the end, for you just to go and browse each of these links and look at some of these products yourself and contrast, browse product experience, search, and then check out flows across all of these different e-commerce sites and products yourself, and try and think about what are the differences and why one makes sense for one product than the other. A question that people often also ask is, should companies have their own growth team? These days, you can actually find a lot of these services. You can outsource them. Some companies offer these services. Why would you have an in-house growth team? The most important reason for an in-house growth team is that if you have really figured out one stream of your business that is going to do really well, the purpose of an in-house growth team is to have your growth go like this rather than like this. So that's the difference an in-house growth team can make for you. And these are the growth pirate metrics. I will be talking about a lot of terminologies here, and I have a lot of explanation of these terminologies in my notes again. In terms of definition, growth team engages in solving optimization problem and minimize the customer acquisition cost and maximizing the lifetime value from users across different channels and marketing segments over time. Each of these terminologies is relevant. What is customer acquisition cost? In very simple basic terms, it's basically if you spent $100 on marketing in a year and you acquired 100 customers, your customer acquisition cost is $1. It's your per customer cost of acquisition, basically. And what is the lifetime value from users? This is basically what kind of value are you deriving in terms of revenue as one of the simplest metric, because we measured acquisition cost and dollar value from your users while they're on your channel. And lifetime value for users vary across the different stages of their presence in your funnel. Let me talk about the funnel a little bit and these pirate metrics. So in the context of growth, a funnel is one of the very popular terms that comes up. Like Laura mentioned, my team focuses on top of the funnel. It is the acquisition team. When you look at these metrics, what happens is when a customer comes to you, to the time they pay you, the conversion at each stage is a fraction of what it was at the previous stage, and it decreases progressively. So a funnel sort of models that behavior, where it is acquisition is very high at the top, and then referral and revenue is very low at the bottom. Very commonly, when we are talking about it from a product engineering perspective, we say, oh, this user is at the top of the funnel. We have to push them to the bottom of the funnel so we can get more value out of them. The main growth pirate metrics are acquisition, activation, retention, and conversion, also called revenue. And then referral is another metric that drives viral loops. Once your user in that funnel, they're logged in with you for a long, long time. So that's the growth funnel and metrics. Cool. Laura, if there are any questions at any time, let me know. I'm also monitoring. I'll be taking questions at the end. So if you have any questions, keep posting and I'll run through them in the end. Cool. Some terminologies that are very common, that you would hear very commonly when you're on a growth team. I've already talked about the growth funnel. These are the pirate metrics, the registration, activation, conversion, and retention. Another thing that you would look at very commonly is trends, the daily trends, the weekly trends, the yearly trends. These are trends of growth. How many users how many users registered on your website today compared to last week? These are the trends that growth teams monitor very closely because they want to make sure that the trend is healthy and growing. The number of active users. Now, the definition of active users varies across different types of products, but usually it's on Coursera, we measure it as the number of users who are actually actively engaging with our products. And it's measured on monthly and daily basis. We actually keep our learners very close to our heart and we call these metrics daily active learners. But in a lot of different companies, growth teams normally call them as DAUs, DAUs, or MAUs, MAUs, monthly active users and daily active users. SEO is another big area of growth. SEO stands for search engine optimization. What that means is when user goes to any of the search engines like Bing or Google search or Yahoo and starts typing in some terminologies, which pages on your site come up and how well they rank. Are they the first search result on the search result pages, or are they at the bottom, or are they not even there? So this is what SEO does, and it's really important for acquisition. A/B testing is another important concept in growth terminology in the growth glossary. What A/B testing means is that anytime as a growth team you roll out new feature, you want that feature to be positive for your learners on the growth funnel metrics, on the pirate metrics. And different metrics may apply to different kinds of features. For example, payment features are mostly target conversion metrics, whereas login sign-up improvements mostly target registration metrics. So A/B testing is when you take your entire user set and you take 50% of them as the control group or the A variant, and 50% of them as the experiment group or the B variant. And you deliver the old experience to the control group, and then you experience to the experimental group. And then you see how they react in terms of the growth metrics with your product. And then you track them, and then you try and figure out, is it positive overall, or is it negative? Are there some things behind this? The only way to deterministically track the trend is once things reach significance. And there is a lot of things, this model is hypothesis testing, where when you have enough data points, you can say for sure whether or not your hypothesis is true. So once things tend towards significance, you can decide to roll out or roll back a feature, depending on how well that feature is doing on the growth metrics. So A/B testing is something that growth engineers do almost every day, very heavily. Growth engineers also collaborate a lot with non-engineering teams. Across the board, when you have product engineering teams, most of the product engineering teams may or may not need to collaborate other teams, but across the board, growth teams need to. And the three most common teams that they interact with is marketing. In fact, growth is a marketing concept, and growth marketer is another type of job role that is very common out there these days. Growth engineers collaborate with data scientists and use data products pretty heavily. As you can see that a growth role is all about all of these metrics. And growth engineers are not trained in the statistical and mathematical background that are needed to analyze A/B tests and some of the other metrics. So they always collaborate with data scientists to help them on that part. And then they, of course, collaborate with design pretty heavily, also brainstorming about the UI/UX improvements that are needed to be done to different features to improve the growth metrics. Cool. So until this point, I was mostly talking about growth from a product and marketing perspective. Let me talk a little bit about growth from an engineering perspective now. So in terms of types of products that a growth team builds, normally the most common types of things that growth teams build is authentication flows, login and sign up flows, user onboarding, where the moment a user signs up or before a user signs up, the product understands a user and tries to figure out how to tailor the experience for the user based on their preferences. So it's all about user preferences. Search, browse, and recommendations is another area where growth team owned by growth teams quite a bit. Payment flows, product pages, like an example that I showed you earlier from Coursera, a course page is a product page. Notifications, email, web, and push about recommendations, promotions going on, and things like that. Ads and promotions are another set of engineering features owned by mostly growth. Search engine optimization and affiliate marketing feeds are also features owned by growth teams. And then a lot of teams collaborating with growth, they need to do some repeated tasks over and over again. So growth teams oftentimes build tools for marketing, data science, SEO, content, and other teams that they need to collaborate with. Sometimes even design when they need to collaborate with graphics and other things like that. Some of the infrastructure underlying growth products are microservice infrastructure for developing backends and web APIs, front-end web apps infrastructure to build the nice web applications. And most growth teams have front-end, backend, and mobile, so mobile infrastructure to support iOS and Android apps. So these infrastructure may often be shared with other teams. For example, at Coursera, we have two other teams other than growth team that work on product development. And all of this infrastructure is shared across all the three teams. And there is an infrastructure team that builds most of these infrastructure to support the product development teams. A/B testing platform is a very core part of what growth does, but it is not limited to growth teams. So at Coursera, again, A/B testing platform is also used by other teams to validate their feature set. But in a lot of companies, A/B testing platform is owned entirely by growth teams. There are also some other platform as a service solutions available for A/B testing, like Optimizely. Payments infrastructure is another one that is mostly owned by growth team to manage all of the payment flows and payment processing and things like that. For login and sign up, again, authentication infrastructure is owned by growth teams. And for browsing and searching, search and recommendations infrastructure is also often owned by growth teams. Some of these infrastructure is easy to build and maintain. Some of these infrastructure can be bought very easily. There are platform as a service solutions for them. And some of these infrastructure need to be built from scratch by every company, and they can open source it or they can use it across multiple companies. Cool. So this is mostly, again, the product engineering side of growth. The core skills that is required by growth engineers is usually a combination of front-end, back-end, and mobile. And growth team are mostly organized as agile teams, which means that they follow sprint planning, stand-ups, and all of the agile methodologies. On front-end, the core skills that growth engineers need to have is HTML, CSS, JavaScript fundamentals. React.js and Angular type of skills, high-level front-end development skills, these are nice to have. But these are skills that a lot of companies are open for you to come and learn. Most companies need you to have the core basic skills in front-end development, which are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. On back-end side, having strong fundamentals in at least one programming language, like Java, Python, Ruby on Rails, or Scala is really important. We use Scala at Coursera on the backend side. Then familiarity with databases like MySQL, NoSQL, Cassandra, MongoDB, databases like that is also important. And that's about the extent of must-have skills that for backend engineering on any product development team, including growth. Things like cloud computing technologies with AWS and Google Cloud are again things that you can learn on the job if you have strong foundations in some of the earlier skills on backend that I talked about. Again, building microservices is another good skill that you can learn on the job, and there are plenty of resources available for you to learn those skills. On mobile, iOS, specifically Swift, Programming is a must-have, and on Android, either Java or Kotlin. The programming languages on Android are essentials. Again, how do you architect good applications, and how do you drive growth from those applications are skills that you can learn on the job. So these are the skills that most starting career starters in engineering should have. You can have those skills coming out of college or through boot camps or through online courses and so on and so forth. Some of the advanced skills to have for this job is things like test-driven development and reliability. And these are the set of skills that somebody more senior in an engineering role will have. Some other kind of advanced skills to have is site reliability engineering, specifically understanding availability and performance. The reason why this skill is important is, as a more senior engineer, you will be responsible for also making sure that the apps that you're developing, the user experience that you're delivering to your users are available to them most of the time and are performing well. These can be a big issue if users are using your services on a mobile device or on slow browsers or in places where the Wi-Fi connection is not great, things like that. Other things to care about is localization, internationalization, accessibility, responsiveness. I'm talking about these skills, keeping in mind that you're developing a product that is tailored towards global audience, where anybody would like to use your product. And then some of the other skills for more senior folks are leadership skills in terms of leading teams, estimating, planning, and scoping projects in product development. In terms of skills specific to growth engineering, one thing I must say that the biggest skill that you should have is curiosity. Curiosity to look into the data and understand what's going on. Curiosity to figure out where will you find that data, is that data available or not, or how do you make that data available so you can understand what's actually going on in the minds of your users, what are they doing, how they are interacting with your product. In general, what I've observed is full stack engineers get a lot out of this role. And a lot of engineers on some of the growth teams that I've observed are full stack. They do both front end and back end. They also do mobile and back end. So they get a lot out of this role. Again, these are not necessarily the skills to start your career on the growth engineering trajectory, but skills that you may acquire over time to further your career or to have a different career path than what you started with. Additional skills that you can also learn on the job is knowing how SEO works, how Google ranks or Bing ranks different types of products in their search results, how A/B testing works, when do we reach significance, what is the likelihood of reaching significance given different types of features that you're developing. Having some understanding of authentication systems or recommendation systems or payments systems, notification systems. These are also very helpful depending on which teams are you working on. An acquisition team, for example, SEO, A/B testing, and authentication systems, these skills are really good. And notification systems, skills around these areas are nice to have. Across all of the different types of growth teams, familiarity with data warehousing and querying your data sets is really important for you to pick up. And the main reason for that is so that you can actually introspect deeper into the data that you might not even have instrumented, and understanding how users are interacting with your product and what are they doing and what they should be doing that they're not doing. So these are the set of skills that you can even learn on the job. You don't necessarily need to have these skills to get hired into a growth engineering role. As I mentioned before, because growth team is working with a lot of cross-functional partners who are trying to run marketing campaigns or analyzing data, creating upsells, making the user base grow in different ways, it's important for you to be able to build tools easily to repeat automated tasks. To create, for example, promotions or run and analyze ads, create upsells, and so on and so forth. Content marketing is pretty hot these days, where a lot of product teams create blog posts like pages. So an easy way to create content and get these pages up and running pretty fast is also some things that a lot of growth engineers look into to build, to automate. So these are the skills. What does a day in the life of a growth engineer look like? So normally when you start your day, you look at dashboards to project user growth. And most growth teams either have a big TV displaying one of these metrics, somebody must have set it up, and you can change them or augment them whenever you have new ideas on things that we should be looking at. The main metrics that any growth engineer looks at is what is the week over week trend? Did we get more users than last week? How are we doing in revenue compared to last week or last month or last year? How much have we grown in terms of paying learners or active learners on our platform in the last year or in the last month or in the last day? Usually daily metrics are spiky and maybe misleading because of daily or seasonal trends. So it's more valuable to look at month over month, week over week, year over year kind of trends. A lot of teams also look at quarter over quarter trends. So it's important to understand which dashboards you should be looking at. For engineers, it's important to look at dashboards to be able to understand, are there bugs that were introduced by specific features? Is the page views or is the traffic on specific APIs trending based on normal expectations? So to spot anomalies like that, it's also important for teams to look at these metrics. The other important thing is to be able to build new features fast and also learning fast. So growth engineers are also learning a lot of things really fast. So you need to understand where are you going to get all of that content that's going to help you upskill into different areas that you need to learn very fast about. The reason why building new features fast is important is because on a typical growth team, you wouldn't be building a full-blown feature until you have tested it using an A/B test to understand whether or not that feature is good for the learners. So it's important to build high-quality minimum viable products, also called MVPs, to be able to put it in front of the user really fast and to see how users would interact with it. A lot of companies even do painted board test, which is basically they would put some feature and would try to gauge interest from the learners whether or not if they built a real feature, would users come and use that feature. Once you have put out an MVP in front of the user, depending on how well it's doing in terms of growth metrics, you may want to either roll it out or you may want to actually improve and iterate on it and then roll it out again to see if it was better than last time. Usually all of this part is done in collaboration with product management and data science teams to help you through the process of understanding how should the product behave and what are the metrics telling you. And also, as I mentioned before, localization, internationalization, accessibility, responsiveness across different sizes, screen sizes is really important. And then, as I mentioned before, I cannot emphasize more on familiarity with how to run and analyze A/B tests. Usually this is again done in partnership with data scientists to understand whether the test is working correctly, the test is doing the right thing, the test split is correct, and whether the test is performing well so that you can decide whether or not to roll it out or roll it back. Cool. So I'm going to go into the training part, and I've already talked about the core skills. If you're new to software engineering, again, the first thing to think about is curiosity. Like I mentioned, curiosity is one of the most important skills to have as a growth engineer. If you're new to software engineering, things that can help you bootstrap your career in this area is boot camps, online courses, degrees, computer science, or growth engineering skills can be learned on the job. For experienced software engineer, again, online courses and boot camps if switching domains is a great idea. Online courses in some of the growth engineering areas that I talked about are great, but like I said before, they are not required for an entry into the growth engineering role. You would naturally start picking up some of those skills on the job. For some of the other ones, you might do a course to get a deeper dive into some of those areas. So needless to say, we have a lot of courses on Coursera to teach some of the core skills. Because I mentioned curiosity is an important skill, I would mention learning how to learn, which is one of the most popular courses on our platform. There is a list of courses that you can take depending on which type of product role you're interviewing for, or which type of company you're interviewing for, what kind of tech stack they have. There are a bunch of courses on Coursera. There are also a bunch of courses outside of Coursera where you can learn those skills. So like I mentioned, I took the full stack web development specialization, one course from the Scala specialization. I also did some of the Android specialization to learn Android early on. Like I mentioned, as there is an SRE course, there is an engineering leadership course. We also have software design and architecture course, and we have courses from AWS and Google Cloud to teach some of the skills in cloud computing area. And here are a list of resources for courses specific to growth engineering, like SEO, recommender systems, data warehousing in BI, and Agile. So here are some of the resources from Coursera. There are a lot of other resources. These are some of the blog posts that I follow that help me keep track of what's going out in the world out there, and a list of posts that are really interesting reads. There is a growth engineering at Netflix post, which is quite interesting on how growth engineering is done at Netflix. Andrew Chen, Jeff Chang are great product entrepreneurs who do a lot of research and consulting on the growth side. John Egan is another growth engineering leader that I follow for a lot of different thoughts on how to build products around growth engineering. Some of the books that I think have been valuable in the past during my transition into a growth engineering role was 0 to 1, Growth Engines and Hacking Growth. 0 to 1 is one of the classic books written by Peter Thiel and one other co-author. So I think that's the bulk of my presentation. If there are any questions around anything, I can take them now. I also have some webinar notes in the end that I'll be sharing, which anybody can just go through and look at some of these links to dive deeper into customer acquisition cost, like customer lifetime value, search engine optimization, A/B testing, and so on and so forth. Cool. At this point, I think I've covered most of the material that I planned. I would let Q&A take over now and let people ask questions if they have any about anything.
Great. Thank you, Richa. So as Richa said, please feel free to type in the chat box any questions that you might have for her. And it's okay if you don't have any questions. I encourage you to join us over in the Coursera community. We do have a computer science forum there. And you're welcome to post questions there and kind of continue the conversation around growth engineering or some other topic that might be interesting to you. I'm just looking, just give it a couple minutes just in case anybody adds anything. And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say that I can also answer questions if you have any later on the webinar post itself. I have looked through some of the slides and gone through the links and so on and so forth. I also wanted to mention that we are also hiring a lot on the growth engineering side in the company, and a list of job openings are also on our website and will be up to date whenever you go and look at them. So I'll also post that link later in the webinar post.
I do want to thank you, Richa, so much for making the time to join us today and share about your journey into growth engineering and teach us about the field. And I want to also thank those of you who joined us live, and of course, thank you to those who are watching the recording later. And I do encourage you to join us in the Coursera community in the computer science forum there. The URL for the Coursera community is simply coursera.community. So if you haven't been there already, check it out. And we are planning additional computer science related events like webinars like this and Q&A sessions. If you have ideas or topics that you're particularly interested in, please do let us know what those are. You can post in the community if you have ideas. And I think that's it. All right.
Thanks, Laura.
Okay, anything else to add?
No, I think we're good. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thanks for everyone who joined the webinar today.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, everybody.